Welcome one and all to a Deadzone battle report. The Plague versus the Forge Fathers at 200 points. There is our battlefield, and as you can see it's on my beautifully assembled terrain board with the underground area, which may not feature too much in this game. You'll see why I perhaps guessed that from the start in a minute. And you can see, well, you probably can't, but you can see there are items out on the table, and I can tell you that it's the Scour scenario, which means that both sides are set up in opposite corners, and then they will be attempting to retrieve items and remove them from the table via the corner that they started in. However, when you see the two lists, you'll probably think that's not a very good scenario for either of those two forces. They're not really suited to it. However, fear not, because we are also using the incoming intel missions, which is the new deck of cards that have come out with the Escalation expansion for Deadzone, and they will give you different missions over the course of the game, which are secret, and when you satisfy them, you can then remove them and take another one, and you can earn victory points that way as well. So if we're not able to do our primary objective, which seems quite likely, then we will be able to still amass victory points in ways other than merely killing each other. Now, you can see that there's a little bit of an open area in the middle, and there's mostly blocked in though. There's not too many huge lines of sight, so I'm not expecting too many open shots, but there is some visibility through holes. Let's go through the forces here. You can see that some of the Forge Fathers have already moved. That is because they won the recon test and they were able to move a couple of models. So you can see, in fact it may have been more than that, so you can see that the Iron Ancestor, which is packing some serious firepower, has already moved forward a little bit. There are several Militia, some of them are armed with bigger weaponry. There's one there with a bit of a machine gun type weapon there. There is a Forge Guard Huscarl, I think is the leader, a very expensive leader, very tough, and there are some more Militia. One of them has a Magma gun of some description, all the others are just standard Militia. So I think there are only is it 7 models in the Forge Father force? I think that sounds about right. So they are drastically outnumbered by the Plague. And you can see we've got 3 zombies there. There are 6 dogs, you can't see them all in this shot. There are 2 Mortars, there's a Plague Teraton, a Plague Swarm, 2 Murderbirds, and the leader is the Stage 3 General, who can turn enemy models into zombies when they die, which could be quite useful here. Sometimes against Forge Fathers you think, well, I'm not going to be doing that much killing, so is there really much chance to use that? But there are some juicy Militia to kill who are much easier to chew through than, for example, the Steel Warriors. So my leader is hiding underneath in the basement section there, aiming to never be shot. And round the corner here you can see the rest of the dogs, the Plague Swarm, one of the Murderbirds, and another dog there with a Mortar. The sweet spot for the Mortar would have been under one of the areas that doesn't have easy access to it. Let's see if we can just see from above here. Okay, you can see at both sides of the table there are those little hatches getting into the underground area. That's a sweet place for a Mortar because they can fire up out of it, and it'll be difficult for opponents to see them without climbing quite high up or walking right up to them. But the corner of the table I've got, I don't have access to those hatches at the moment. So one of the Mortars is on the upper level, hiding as much as it possibly can, and the other one on the lower level around this corner. So the enemy, if they start climbing up, they will have a sight down at them. So my strategy is ignore the things I can't kill, which would be the Iron Ancestor. I've got 0 chance of killing that throughout this game, I would say. The only thing I have with any AP to speak of at all is the Plague Swarm, and even that, I wouldn't really like its chances fighting against the Iron Ancestor, with it having the size advantage, and it's just really big, and it would take me a long time to kill it if I don't get killed first. So I'm going to try and ignore that. The Plague Swarm, I would rather save that and try and use it to kill the enemy leader, because I think that's the only one of the regular infantry that has armor. So before we go on to the command dice there, you're perhaps seeing how neither of the forces are suited to this scenario. Picking up items is not the strong suit of a Plague list that features dogs and zombies and murderbirds and plague swarms heavily, there's very little that can actually pick up items, and of the models that can, most of them don't want to move. For example, the Mortars. And the Forge Fathers, perhaps slightly more suited, but they've got such a low model count that it'll be difficult for them to balance picking up items and carrying them away while being slow and fighting as well. So we're going to have to hope for some good mission cards to come out if we're going to get victory points here, and to do some killing. If there were no mission cards in this game, I would say it'd be nailed on for a draw, because there's no way either of us are going to be able to kill enough to get the win. There physically aren't enough Forge Fathers for me to kill to get to 20 victory points, which would mean that I would be able to just hide my more expensive models that are faster than the Forge Fathers. For example, the Teraton, that's worth a few victory points, so that could just hide and not get killed for the whole game. And it would just play out as a rather dull draw, I would say. So the cards should spice this one up. And let's have a look at the command dice before we go on to that. So in the first turn, I've got movement, extra activation, fight, and a splat. The splat, of course, turning enemies into zombies. And my opponent has move, some extra dice, and some splats. And his splat allows the AP of an incoming attack to be reduced by 1, which is only going to be useful against the Plague Swarm. And here are my mission cards. So initially, I've got pushing forward, score if you have a model in the opponent's deployment zone at the end of a round. I will be able to cash that in at some point, surely, because I'm going to be moving forward and my opponent doesn't have enough firepower to kill all my terrible little models. So all the dogs and zombies, surely something's going to get in the enemy deployment zone at the end of a round. So that's going to be very handy. It's only a scratch. When a friendly enemy model is the target of a shoot action and wins the test by 3 successes or more. I don't really like the sound of that one, because most of my models, they don't have amazing survive stats. Maybe something like a Murderbird could possibly get that. I think, are they actually 5+? I can't remember now. But none of my models seem hugely suited to that one. I would have to get a very lucky roll. There are some affections that would think that sounds quite tasty when they're going to be shot by something terrible and they have a really good survive stat. Then that's when that one can come up. It's only a scratch where a friendly model is target of a shoot action. Oh yeah, that's the same one again. So 2 of those, so I'm thinking they're not going to be useful at all. So I'm going to take the first opportunity next turn to discard one of those because I don't like my chances at all. And here are my opponent's cards. Now we were keeping these secrets, we just took the pictures without the other player looking. So my opponent has, this is the first time I'm seeing the picture, take them out. It caused 3 or more potential damage from a shoot or fight action. Very possible. Splat attack, discard a command dice splat without using its ability. That's very likely to come up because he's got 2 splats, and I don't think the Plague Swarm is going to get into combat easily this turn. And just keep moving, score after using a move command dice to trigger a fight action. It's possible. We'll see. So you can see with my scout moves, the Murderbird has moved up quite far into the middle of the table there. There isn't anywhere really juicy for him to go, because I would like, if the enemy had deployed anything underneath in the basement area, the birds would like to fly around there and do some killing, if possible, where they can be safe from the fire of things like the Iron Ancestor, but my opponent has not deployed anyone in the underground level, so it's only really the Teraton that's useful down there. But even then, with the scenario, the Teraton would still be running around for a little while, and on this side, which is the main enclosed basement area, it's only really the Iron Ancestor that it would be able to teleport out and fight, and that would be a bit of a suicide mission. So you can see that the Ancestor is able to get a bit of line of sight on the bird's feather, because I don't use the tiny Murderbirds. If I did, if I just put one of them, a little tiny one on a base, like some people do, I could have just hidden it behind that wall. But no modelling for advantage going on here. And he takes a couple of damage, but after he takes damage, I think, you know what, something else could end up shooting him and finish him off, or the enemy could move out of the way, so I'm going to swoop in and kill one of the militia immediately before this bird gets killed. So that is a success there, and for every model that dies, the Forge Fathers are actually going to feel that hit, because even if they've got really powerful models left, there's a limited number of my models they can kill per turn, and I've got so many, it's going to be difficult for them to chew through them all. So there's Mr. Corpsey there. And some victory points were dished out already. The victory points for the Forge Fathers was due to cashing in one of the intel cards. doing 3 potential damage to the Murderbird, and the Tough absorbed one of those. Still on turn 1 though, and the enemy leader has hopped up into this tower and has fired down and has suppressed the dog and killed the mortar that was in there as well. Wow, wow, wow. So that's going to be some sweet, sweet VPs for the Forge Fathers, and one of the mortars down before it can fire. Over here, you can see that there's a dog in this corner. This is the top right from my corner's perspective. He was fighting one of the militia in there, and the bird has swooped in and turned the tide and just eaten him. And then he's turned into a zombie. So, very nice. And I possibly should have turned the other guy that died into a zombie, but I forgot that I had the splat at the time, because he was further into enemy territory. Up here, now this is an interesting dynamic, this situation here. So, there's an enemy leader in a tower. You would think I would like to get him a friend in there, because I want to protect him in case something like the Plague Swarm gets up here to fight him at some point. However, by putting a friend in there, that allows me to throw a dog in there and attack the militia rather than the Huscarl, which means that the dog probably isn't going to get killed by a militia in close combat while moving in. So, yeah. It's interesting to put a model in there to support your stronger model, but then you do leave the opportunity for that situation to come up where the enemy can pile models in there and attack the weaker thing and get support for when they bring something stronger in later. So it's an interesting one. Over here, you can see that one of the militia has picked up an item, which is some kind of grenade, and he's moving away to try and deposit it in the corner to get that 1 victory point. I'm not sure that's really the wisest thing to be doing, because there are a lot of plague models to be killed. And you can see what does end up happening here. So the enemy leader and the militia being in there, I ended up throwing another dog in, and the Plague Swarm, which is the maximum amount of models I could put in there. And the Plague Swarm went in, and I think I decided to kill... I went in first and tried to kill the leader, but then failed to do so, and then I used a fight dice to then attack the militia because I would have been down a dice for no longer moving in. So I thought I didn't fancy my chances anymore without that extra dice. So I thought I'd take out the enemy leader's support. So his commander is now trapped in there with a Plague Swarm and 2 dogs. And look at that, their ranks are thinning seriously now, the Forge Fathers. They have so few models left, they're going to struggle to make a dent in my force, because not many Plague units have died yet. You can see I've moved some zombies out pretty much into the open, and I don't care about them at all because they're not giving away VPs. And if the Iron Ancestor wants to waste his time shooting at them, that is fine by me, because that means he's not targeting the more important models. And the Teraton has just jumped up on the tower. There's nothing for him to fight at the moment, because lots of the militia are dying. The Huscarl is already locked in combat, and there's no space for more models in there, and it'd be suicidal to attack the Iron Ancestor. So, at the end of turn 1, Forge Father 7, Plague 5, but I think it's leaning my way in terms of kills, definitely. And then another card was cashed in, which was the get rid of one of your splat dice, the Forge Fathers. So they picked up another VP there before turn 2. So, in the second turn, and look at all those enemy splats there. I'm sure he doesn't want that many, because I'm sure the Plague Swarm isn't going to be able to attack him that many times, even though I do have a fight dice, so 2 splats would have been okay. And, of course, there's a potential if he chose to fight the Plague Swarm, maybe he would want to use it then, but he would probably want to try and kill the dogs instead. So yeah, 3 splats, a bit overkill there. And I'm quite satisfied with shoots where the Mortar can have a go twice. The extra activation I don't really care about at all, because I've got so many models I'm going to have a ton left at the end regardless. And I would have tried to reroll those and just got them again probably. So the Iron Ancestor clears out the zombies, which is fine. And the Mortar unloads. And there are 2 militia in the same cube, which is suicidal when you're against a Mortar. So they both got blown into neighbouring cubes, and one of them is wounded as well. The one that's not wounded has the Magma weaponry there. The one that's carrying the item wounded, he just has a regular gun. So we remember to take a picture of the mission cards again. So I've got a really interesting one. Go out with a bang. Score if you discover the booby trap item. Now, that's worth 5 victory points for setting off the booby trap. And I've got a lot of expendable models in this list. I've got a load of dogs who are only worth 1 VP if they get killed. And most of the zombies have died, but I have generated another zombie. So I've got lots of really cheap models running around that I can just go and open all the crates with and see if I can find a booby trap and get 5 VPs. And then pushing forward, I haven't been able to cash that in yet, but I'm confident I will have someone in the enemy deployment zone soon. And it's only a scratch. Again, that's going to be useless, so I'm going to get rid of that one soon as well, as soon as I get the opportunity. And the enemy, so there's a few changes here. Lead from the rear. Score if your leader is in your deployment zone at the end of the game. So that's one you would hold on to, possibly, if you think your leader's going to be in your own deployment zone. Which he might. He's not far away from it right now. The next one, going to plan. Score when you've completed at least 4 incoming intel missions. So you have to keep track of how many you've successfully cashed in. And look over here. Score when a friendly model is the target of a shoot action that has the clear shot modifier. That is totally useless because I only have the mortar and it's going to be shooting from a position of cover the whole game. So that one is obviously going to get discarded at the first opportunity. So you can see that my remaining zombie is just going around opening crates. He can't actually pick up any of the items or use any of the items, but he can look at them. And there's a potential for finding intel as well, but I really want that booby trap to get the 5 victory points. But it's not there. Then my dogs steam in to attack the Magma gun-wielding militia. The first dog didn't do it. The second one steamed in there. And look at this attack. Wow, nothing really is going to stand up to that when it doesn't have any armor. So, another one dead. So I think my opponent is down to pretty much his leader, the Iron Ancestor, and maybe one other guy. So there is the Huscarl in there fighting the dogs. I think he may actually kill one of them. And there's how it's looking. So I haven't got anyone into the enemy deployment zone yet. So that card is not being cashed in. But over around this side, I'm slowly moving everyone forwards. There's the only surviving militiaman there with the grenade. He ran away at the first opportunity. And tons of dogs running around. So it's not looking good for the Forge Fathers at this stage. They need to get some more luck with the intel cards, I think. So at the end of that turn, quite a low scoring one. So Forge Fathers 9, Plague 8, but I am sitting on some valuable cards I'm going to be able to cash in soon. So, the next turn. Now this is amazing here. So the card I discarded, I replaced with Forward March. Score if you have 2 or more models in the enemy's deployment zone at the end of the round. So combining that with the other gets models into the enemy deployment zone at the end of a round card, I can get potentially 6. Because I've got so many cheap models to throw in there, and I've still got that booby trap out there somewhere that I'm looking for. So I could get a ton of VPs from the cards in this turn. My opponent, going it alone, score if you have a model in the opponent's deployment zone at the end of the game, 6 points. So that would be a good one for the Iron Ancestor, because I'm not going to be able to kill it. So, however, there is an issue with these at the end of the game cards, though. Because I think, unless I'm mistaken, I believe they're only going to score once the game's already been declared as over. So you can't use these cards to actually win the game. If that is incorrect, then let me know, because I don't have the new book to hand. And there are the command dice. So extra move, which is always nice for the Plague to get into combat. Activation, which is useless at the moment. Shoot for the Mortar. And a splat, which is handy in case I want more zombies, although there's not much for the zombies to do at the moment. And my opponent stuck with a ton of splats again. So, the Militia moves into the corner and drops off an item, so it's 1 VP. It does seem like a waste of time, this mission sometimes, unless you've got Zs who get extra points for dropping items off, I think. And they can carry more of them. So the Mortar takes some damage from being shot by the Iron Ancestor, and one of the dogs is gunned down as well. However, the other dog starts hopping around opening crates, and look at that. It's the booby trap. That is going to be 5 sweet, sweet victory points to the Plague. Boom. Very juicy, and the dog doesn't even die. I think it just gets blown into a neighbouring cube and wounded. So at this stage, I think, okay, I'm going to win now, because I'm going to be able to get models into the enemy deployment zone, which is going to get me a load more victory points because of my secret missions at the end. So the Teraton, there's nothing for it to do, so it might as well just hide and avoid cheaply giving away its life and potentially gifting the opponent's forces away back into the game, because they would have to reach 20 points on the same turn to get a draw. So Teraton hiding. Zombies just parked itself in front of the Iron Ancestor, just tempting him. There is actually a card that you gain victory points if you give your opponent an open shot on one of your models. So if you just position something out in the open like that, maybe your opponent will think you've got that card and might not even shoot you. Or maybe they'll position themselves not to have an open shot. So that's an interesting one. But neither of us have that card, as you saw. So the Forge Guard Huscarl decides he's had enough of this fight and he's going to try and break away. How wise is that when there's a plague swarm in there ready to swing at him? Let's see how wise it is. Not very wise at all, because he's dead. Wow, wow, wow. So that's going to be a ton of VPs, and it's looking like it's going to be a plague definite victory here. I mean, look at that. 25-11, because the VPs for killing the leader, and of course for the cards I was able to cash in by piling a load of models into the enemy deployment zone. So not looking good at all. The other militia who had dropped off an item was killed in the corner by dogs, I think. So yeah, not a good day for the Forge Fathers there. So here's what's left alive. The Iron Ancestor, which I was never going to scratch. Zombie. Loads of my stuff. It was actually a Murderbird in the corner that killed the militia, and then it was turned into a zombie. So they are in the enemy deployment zone, as is the other dog on the right there. There's a dog that was the dog that set off the booby trap and got blown into that cube there, who was wounded, and there's a zombie there as well, alive. There's also my dog and the plague swarm in the tower, and the mortar, and there's also a Teraton around somewhere. So yeah, there is a ton of plague models left alive. Not much for the Forge Fathers at all. And in the end, those incoming intel mission cards were very pivotal for the plague forces there, and quite a decisive victory. I think the two lists, the Forge Father list, let's start with that one. It's lacking in models severely, because as good as the Iron Ancestor and the Forge Guard Huscarl are, they can't kill that many models in a turn, and they're not very fast, so they're only in one spot, they're easy to avoid, and unless you get multiple shoot dice, you're not going to be killing too many models. So when you're up against something that's just spamming the table with really terrible dogs and zombies, then it's not ideal. Because anything I've got that can actually fight, like Teratons and Murderbirds, they are going to eat the militia for breakfast. And that's going to leave my opponent with very few models, which is ultimately what happened. So I think as far as the lists matching up, it was quite favourable for me. Although that it could have been quite different, though, if you end up with a different scenario. If you end up with something where all the objective scoring has to take place in the middle of the table, you've got just a ton of 2-point objectives. There is that one mission that has 4 of them all next to each other. Then the Iron Ancestor sitting in there would make me think twice. Although, with so many zombies and dogs, it would be easy enough to just pop 1 or 2 of them into each cube. So overall, the way the lists were looking, I think the Plague had the advantage. My list, it's lacking in AP, seriously, only 1 source of it. The Teraton didn't get to do much in this game, but he is a threat, and against other lists, he's definitely a lot more useful. The second Mortar, it's a really tough one, deciding whether it's worth having 2, because it's almost as if you've got 2. If you can find a good spot for a Mortar, and you get a shoot dice, you're rarely going to get 2 shoot dice with this list. So having the extra mortar, all you're doing is adding 1 extra shot and upping it to 3 probably rather than 2. So the second one, it's maybe not the best value. So it might be worth taking out one of them and putting something else in there. And maybe another plague swarm, maybe switching some of the zombies for ghouls, so that in this scenario, if I'm at a tournament where there are no intel mission cards in play, I would actually have the opportunity to get some victory points by picking up the crates and taking them away. That would be something to consider, because there are very few models I've got that can actually do that. The leader, I'd tried out a lot of the other leaders in my recent games with the Plague, the Stage 1 and the new Lieutenant, but my main success with the Plague seems to have come when I did take the General. When I won a tournament with the Plague, I was using the General heavily, and it was a list. It was 2 lists actually at that tournament, but they were fairly similar to this kind of setup here, where there's mortars, there's the General, and there's quite a few big nasty things. There's Murderbirds swooping around, plague swarms. So yeah, those size 2 models that the Plague have access to are very, very juicy indeed. As soon as you go for size 3, then there's potential for you to be kind of locked out of positions by the half cubes. Like if you see that spot on the left there that Militia started on, a Teraton wouldn't be able to reach there. So I think Murderbirds and Plague Swarms are definitely superior for that reason, I think. Although, of course, there are some setups where just being bigger is always better, because you're going to get the extra fight dice when you're engaged in close combat. But it depends on the event you're at as well. If you're at a tournament where there's very little terrain and there are lots of full cubes, then having Teratons bouncing around all over the place is obviously pretty sweet. But on packed tables, like mine tends to be, there are a lot of hiding places from height 3 or bigger models in close combat. So the Plague Teraton particularly, and things like the Aberration, will suffer in those situations. The Reb Teraton not so much, because it does have guns as well. So if you're going to take larger models, then it's good to combine them with mortars actually, because you can blow the enemy off their perch, as it were, and then dive in. So, what do the cards add? Well, obviously a lot. There's a big random element to them, as you saw, so I'm not sure whether people will be running them in tournaments, but you never know. I'm not necessarily saying I would be in favour of them turning up at tournaments, because it is a very hefty random element, and usually they don't like that much randomness in a tournament, apart from that one Vanguard event that I went to. It was very, very random. But overall, I think they add a bit of extra spice. There are other ways of playing as well in the new Deadzone book. There are certain terrain features that you can use now, but I haven't sampled any of that yet, so I'm going to reserve judgment on that for now. And I think it's about time to wrap this one up, so don't forget to leave your comments. There hasn't been too much Deadzone to speak of on this channel in a while. That's because I haven't been playing that much of it lately. Whatever I play generally turns into a video. So if I start playing more Deadzone, which I'm hoping to, then there will be more videos. And there are a couple of tournaments as well over the next few months, so that should bump up the content as well, just not as many as there are Kings of War events. And maybe some Dreadball coming up soon as well, we shall see. So don't forget to like the video, of course, and check out all the links in the description, all the social media shenanigans, my Facebook group, Twitter, and so on. And of course, don't forget to just empty your bank account into my Patreon at regular intervals. Sounds like a really good idea. Bankrupt yourself so that I can make some more mediocre battle reports. And with that, I think all that remains to be said is good night out there, whatever you are.